The Warrior Soul podcast is written, produced, and edited by me, Chris Albert. Our mission is to provide tools, tactics, strategies, and ideas to U.S. military veterans and anybody else willing to listen to help them to navigate toward living their absolute best lives. If you find these episodes helpful, please share them out with somebody that you know of that can use them. And if you really like the podcast, please also head over to iTunes and write us a written rating and a review. It really helps us to spread word about the show, and it really helps to get these tools in the hands of others who really need them. This podcast is sponsored by F-Bomb Nutrition. They make awesome, delicious packets of macadamia nut butters. They mix them up with chocolate, with sea salt, with pecan butter. They're absolutely delicious, and they also have a number of other fat-fueled snacks, like their meat sticks and their cheese crisps. They're amazing people who are sending boxes of this stuff out to the troops on the front lines, and they're offering 20% off to our listeners on their first orders. If you head over to www.dropinfbomb.com and use the code WarriorSoul at checkout, you'll get 20% off of that first order. And I'm going to keep the announcements short and sweet today. If you can, stick around to the end. I got a really special announcement about a brotherhood that we're creating here at Warrior Soul. So I hope you enjoy this episode. I hope you get a lot out of it. And without delay, let's get into it.
This is Chris Albert, and I'm here to remind you of one thing. Someday, you're going to die. Now, that's not some morbid statement or scary idea. It's a solid fact. Your time here on this earth is limited. And we need to be reminded of this as much as possible for one simple reason: to live your best life while you can. This is the Warrior Soul Podcast.
What is going on, everybody? This week, we have somebody who's making their second appearance on the Warrior Soul Podcast, and that is Dr. Kirk Parsley. If you don't know who Doc Parsley is, you should Google him right now. He served as a U.S. Navy SEAL. Then he wanted to get out, but he also wanted to go to medical school. And he found out that the U.S. Navy has this amazing program where you can go, you can train to be a doctor, and then you can come back and you can serve. And he got the chance to do that. But not only did he get the chance to do that, he got the chance to put together a resiliency clinic with the U.S. Navy SEALs. Now, one of the things about Doc Parsley is you'd expect him to be a Navy SEAL, go all out, balls to the wall. One of the things he's constantly talking about is making sure that you're taking care of yourself, making sure that you're getting adequate sleep. Because if you're not, if you're one of these people who thinks they can survive on 4, 5, even 6 hours of sleep, you're fooling yourself. It's decreasing your performance and decreasing your quality of life. And we get into that in this conversation. Doc Parsley is one of the smartest people out there when it comes to this stuff, and it's a real honor to have him on the show. So without delay, let's get into this episode with Doc Parsley, and you guys are going to enjoy it. Talk to you soon. Doc Parsley, welcome back to the show, man.
Well, thank you. Pleasure to be back.
We had you on a couple of years ago, and I got to meet you out at Paleo FX. My friend Andrew Marr introduced you to me. But I'm a big fan of your work, and for anybody who really wants to get down in the details of Doc Parsley's story, definitely head back to that podcast. We're going to put a link up on the show notes. But could you quickly just tell people who you are and where you come from?
Yeah, sure. So I guess what's relevant to who I am, what I do today is, I joined the military right out of high school, went to SEAL training, made it through SEAL training, became a SEAL, did that for 6 years. And then, just the decided to go on and do a bigger, better things. That was the Clinton administration when we were kind of the world's police force and not really doing anything that we trained for. Got out and, got married, started having kids, went to college, and then decided I wanted to be a doctor. Found out while I was applying for medical schools that the military had their own medical school. I honestly wasn't a big fan of the military. Like I'm not a very good rule following kind of dude. But they were going to pay me to go to medical school instead of the other way around. And it's pretty hard to pass up. And that comes with the commitment, obviously, like as being a doctor after graduation for 8 years, essentially. And I figured I'd get back to the SEAL teams as the doc, and I did. And that was, just kind of rewarding to be able to get, kind of come full circle and provide back to the organization that helped me become who I'd become. And I was really well versed in sports medicine and orthopedics, and I really kind of figured that's what I was going to do as a SEAL. Like they were going to, because that's all I knew of when I was a SEAL. I didn't even know we had a doctor, honestly. Built this great sports medicine facility, and what guys came to talk to me about was performance issues. And it wasn't from an injury. It was just, they just weren't feeling good. They felt like their motivation was low. Their body composition was suffering. Their energy in the gym, their ability to put out work, just everything was suffering. And, I had no idea because I was a Western trained medical doctor. Like I only knew how to diagnose and treat disease, and they didn't have any diseases. So I had to really learn a lot about what goes into being able to sustain performance for a long period of time. And one of the biggest factors, I'd say no, by far the biggest factor that I came across is people just weren't sleeping enough. And I didn't know anything about sleep because they don't teach you anything about sleep in medical school. I didn't have a single class on sleep. Once I started learning like what actually happens while you're asleep, I'm like, well, Jesus, no shit. Like this is the panacea. This is the best sports enhancing compound or activity in the world, or performance enhancing activity in the world is sleep. And by a long shot, I mean, it would outperform any drug that we know today. That just led to me preaching a lot of that in the SEAL teams. And fortunately, the leadership, bought into it and did a lot of changes and training and so forth. And it wasn't an organization that really valued sleep before, because that was just kind of a sign of weakness. You didn't really need it. And if you wanted it, you could just push hard and push through it and all that crap. And I was able to make some changes, help a lot of guys out. I still get, I've been out of the team, or I've been out of the military for almost 7 years now. It'll be 7 years in January. And I still get probably one call a week from a team guy, asking me questions, like trying to get their performance online. And so I was really fortunate enough to like go in there and learn a lot and build, make a difference with the guys. And that just kind of led to other speaking gigs and then consulting gigs. And now I work primarily as a consultant, sort of like, I'm like a health coach with a medical degree and a psychology degree. So I work with people for a year, and it's usually people who burn themselves out. They're 45, 55, traded their health for wealth for 20 or 30 years. They're overweight. They're metabolically broken now. They're depressed. Their marriage is falling apart, or like their brother who's a year younger than them or a year older than them died of a heart attack, and now they're all scared. And so that's my general client. And if you're realistic about it, and then you do things in a lifestyle way, and you're not tricking your physiology, you're just actually improving your physiology. It takes a year to lose 30 or 40 pounds. And that's still ambitious. And I mean, there are plenty of guys who can't quite get that off in a year. But everything else improves. And I get them to quit worrying so much about how they look with their shirt off and more about how they perform. Because that's where happiness comes from, right? Performance is not whether or not you have six pack.
And just being there for life,
and
enjoying themselves. And it seems like it's so hard to tell people that you can't burn the candle from both ends. And well, you come from two professions, Navy SEALs and the medical profession, where there's not a big premium that's placed on sleep in your training. I mean,
the opposite, in fact. I mean, we were rewarded. Well, I mean, you've been in the military, like in the military, like your reputation is everything, because it's really hard to have metrics on how good you are at being a SEAL, especially when we didn't even have combat. So like your reputation purely comes from living up to the values of the organization. And the organization is, you're always ready and you're always working, and you're going to work until it gets done, and you're willing to pay any price to do it. And so when you get tasked with something in the SEAL teams, like sleep isn't even an option. Like nobody even thought of that. It's like, we're going to stay.
You want to be one of those guys who can thrive off of like 2-3 hours sleep. You don't need food. You just need a little bit of Copenhagen and some water, and you're good to go. Right?
Cup of coffee, maybe once you get in your 30s, like the Chiefs, like the E7s, 8s, and 9s, they'll drink the coffee. Man. And then medical school is the same way. Like when you're rotating through the hospitals, like if you're the guy who stays up all night on call and is busy and hustling the whole night and getting tons of work done, and you're the hero, and like you're the one that gets the good grades and all the accolades. Of course, the smarter guy's the one who's like, doing the bare minimum and getting a few hours of sleep, but I didn't know that. I was out to prove, man. I can do this. I can work harder than anybody. Yeah, nearly killed myself.
That type A personality that guys tend to have who enter those professions, and it's like the Achilles heel, where they think they've constantly got to push themselves, and it goes on. I mean, even guys that I've met who are getting into their late 30s, early 40s, I see them out there. They're trying to train like they're training for buds, and that's a big thing right now, right? Training like you're going to train for buds, but I don't think people understand the attrition rates that happen in buds. And if you're somebody who's just training to be good at your business, good at your life, that's not necessarily going to help you, right?
Right. Well, I mean, the other reality that people don't like to swallow. So one thing that people don't like to swallow is that you need to sleep 8 hours a night. Everybody on this planet needs to sleep 8 hours a night. Like there are no exceptions. There are people who suffer less with less sleep, but everybody suffers. So if you want the fullest out of your life, you have to sleep 8 hours a night. And that's a minimum. I think the number ends up being, I got my ears pinned back on LinkedIn. I argued with a PhD about this, and it turns out he was right. It's essentially 8.2 hours is what's been clinically proven to be kind of the bare minimum for 95% of the population or something. So people don't want to hear that because they say they don't have time to sleep. They have time to watch television and go on social media and, jerk off all day, like do all kinds of stupid shit, but they can't sleep an extra 2 hours. Like, yeah, you can. So I don't even work with people who won't do that, but that's hard for people. That's a tough pill for people to swallow. They don't want to hear that they need to sleep. The other thing they want to hear is that aging matters, man. I mean, and I always thought, well, I'm not going to be one of those guys that I'll stay in shape, and I've stayed in shape, but I'm damn near 50. I couldn't survive one single day of SEAL training right now. I mean, not one. I wouldn't make it there a single day, and I would be broken. I'd fail everything, and I'd be broken. and I've worked hard to stay in shape, and I train with really good athletes, but not even close. So for somebody who's never even been a SEAL to think at 30 years old or 35 or 40 years old to train anything close to being a SEAL is ridiculous. I mean, why not just say you're going to go sprint like an Olympian or something? I mean, it's like you're like you're nowhere near that level. Like, don't even why even attempt that? Be smart about it. And that's another, I think that's just another kind of thing that's part of this immediate gratification culture. It's like, I should be able to get in shape in 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 3 months. Like, no, no. If you're broken, it's a year, maybe 2 years to be really very rugged again. And then guess what? You have to work every day for the rest of your life to maintain that. And it's going to keep declining no matter what you do. You're going to keep getting worse, but you can stave that off and slow the deceleration of your performance and all that stuff. But, age matters, man. And, we might be getting close to being able to, put a serious brake on how fast we age, but not going to help me because I'll be 60 before we get there. And best I'll be able to do is probably hold on to a 60-year-old's performance. But, they'll be great for people who are, 25 or 30, 10 or 15 years from now when that happens.
Yeah. And, I've heard all types of rationalizations. Like, I'm fine with 5 hours of sleep. I'm fine with 6 hours of sleep. I'm fine with I could do 3 hours of sleep once a week and be okay. But I've been hearing a lot about sleep deficits. And, if you're burning the candle at both ends for a period of time, there's going to be a debt, I think, that needs to be filled, right?
Yeah. And that's been proven by just about every kind of performance sleep research that we do. So one of the things that if you want to test the impact of sleep deprivation, if you want to test the impact of not getting enough sleep on any kind of performance, the first thing that you have to be sure of is that they're not already sleep deprived when you start, right? And so what they do is something called an accommodation. And this started with William Dement and something called the bunker trials, where they put, they were college students because no one else would do it for that amount of money or have that much time to take off work, but, so they were college students, and, they've since done it with other cultures and other age groups and all that. But what they found is they would put people in a cold, dark room that had nothing in it. This is obviously way before electronics and cell phones and, all that stuff. So they put them in a World War II pill bunker, which is where they got the name from. They put them in this cold, dark room with nothing except a bed and a toilet. That's it. Like, not any light. And, they kept them in there 14 hours a day, and then they let them out 10 hours a day, and then put them back in for 14 hours. And they did this for a really long time. I can't remember. It's been years since I read the study, but I want to say 3 or 4 months this went on. And what happened is the average person, when they started this study, slept 12 and a half hours a night because they had no idea what time it was or how long they'd been asleep. There was no frame of reference. They slept 12 and a half hours. But then over time, somewhere between 3 to 6 weeks, they would, gradually sleep less and less until the point where everybody was sleeping about 8 hours a night. And then it didn't matter how long you kept the study going, they were only sleeping 8 hours a night, which means that they're staying awake in a cold, dark room with nothing but a bed for 6 hours and being wide awake, which is, if you can do that, you don't have any sleep deprivation, obviously. So, that was sort of the evidence that they've paid back the sleep debt. Now, a lot of people confuse that idea with, well, now you've repaired everything you've damaged. No, not at all. It's just like being out of shape and then getting back in shape doesn't mean that there was no sequelae of, no consequences to the 20 years you were out of shape. Like, you did some damage. There's some suboptimal things about about your physiology and your performance that are just going to be there. Maybe over time you can dwindle it down, but it damages the brain to have sleep deprivation. And the original point when you said, how people feel, that's kind of the biggest problem with sleep is that, if I'm coaching you on working out or nutrition or something, you have a very accurate subjective experience, right? You know what it feels like when you're working out. You know if you went to the gym or not. You know if you ate right or not. You know what you feel like when you eat well versus when you eat poorly. But our self-assessment of our sleep isn't that great. And there's a couple of things that point to that. So there's research trials where they're testing people's performance, and they sleep adapt them. So they pay off their sleep debt, and then they start training them or testing them on something. And then in the morning, and they're depriving them 2 hours of sleep, and they do worse. And when you ask them, they say they know they did worse. Like, yeah, I was tired. I didn't do as well. And then day 2, that happens. And day 3, maybe that happens. But by day 4, almost every single person, even though they've gotten 2 hours less sleep than they need for 4 nights in a row, they'll say, I feel fine. I've totally adapted to the new sleep routine, and I think I'm performing as well as I ever have. And the data shows exactly the opposite. No, you've gotten worse every single day, including today. And they get worse the next day, and they get worse the next day, and they'll swear that they're not tired, that they feel fine, and they adapted to the sleep thing, and it's totally normal. And so I use that metaphor with drinking, right? Like that's in my TED Talk. It's like, well, if you have a couple of beers, you're aware that you've had a couple of beers, and you probably shouldn't be driving. Or you're on the verge, and you need to like make sure that you're plenty of time to get sober before you drive. But if you have like 6 beers, you're like, yeah, I can drive, man. Like you make stupid decisions. Yeah. Your self-awareness goes away. And the same thing happens with sleep deprivation. And it's actually the same area of your brain. It's the prefrontal cortex. And that's what makes all your executive decisions, where you're basically using that to predict, working with things you haven't actually done. Like you don't have to jump off your roof to know if it would hurt to jump off your roof, right? You have enough experience and you understand gravity enough. You're like, yeah, that'd be a bad idea. That's prefrontal cortex. Interestingly, when you're sleep deprived or if you're drunk, those are the areas that are impacted. And all that attention deficit disorder is that area being impacted. So that's why a drunk person and a sleep deprived person and an ADD person all act the same, because they're missing that same kind of function in their brain, which is, where, like I said, where all the simulation goes on, all the predictive knowledge and problem solving kind of. So you lose that self-awareness because you're losing that function of your brain, which is really what makes you the smartest animal on the planet. It's the prefrontal cortex. None of the rest of our brain is all that remarkable.
Wow. Now I got to ask this because, I think we've all been through it. A lot of the guys who listen to the show have been through it, but on deployment, there was long periods of time where I was up for like 72 hours, 72
yeah.
straight. I remember times when I was actually hallucinating. I'd been up so long.
Yeah.
And then beyond that, when I got out, I went to grad school for a while, was doing, all-nighters and kind of killing myself through that. And then, going off into the entrepreneurial world. I mean, as an entrepreneur, I can't say that my sleep hygiene's been the best.
Right.
For the people listening to the show, based off of what you just said, how long do you think that kind of impact lasts, and what should guys do if they've gone through periods like that?
Yeah, well, so two lots of news there. There's the good news and the bad news. The bad news is it probably lasts to some extent forever. The good news is that you'll have a lot of company because like we've all done that to ourselves. I would say if you got heavy into regenerative medicine, which is kind of where my passion is these days, and that's a lot of things like, peptides and hormones and stem cells and hyperbarics and IR and transcranial magnetics and, all of that type of stuff to kind of accelerate brain repair. Because that's the biggest cost, right? Like it affects all of our physiology. It affects our lipidology. It affects organ functions. It affects, whether or not we get atherosclerosis or to the degree we get that. So it has physiological effects, but the biggest impact is probably in your brain. And basically what happens is you don't flush out the waste product. So like if you just think of a human, like we eat food, we use that food, and we produce waste from that food. Well, all we are is 7 billion cells that all do exactly the same thing, and we're just like the big manifestation of it. So every cell in your body is producing waste when it's living, doing whatever work it does, depending on the cell. And what happens when you don't sleep is those waste products build up, and then it's I mean, this is inaccurate, but it's a good metaphor. Essentially, is that it's then kind of like atherosclerosis, right? When things kind of build up in your arteries, the reason atherosclerosis is so dangerous is because that leads to an inflammatory condition, and then when you have these blood vessels that have inflamed walls and these little pockets of lipids and whatever they have on them, your body's solution is to lay calcium over that, because that protects it. And, that's the same thing you do. Like if you have a chronically inflamed tendon or a chronically inflamed ligament or anything, like you've probably had x-rays where a doctor tells you have a bone spur. Well, there's no such thing as a bone spur. Like you didn't grow a bone, you didn't grow like this blade of bone. What you did is you calcified a tendon, and in an x-ray that looks like, a bone spur. It looks like a little needle of bone come out. So you kind of do the same thing in your brain. But it's not really calcium deposits, but it's something very akin to that. And you're just you're walling that off. Because that area is damaged. So you're just kind of going, well, let's ignore that so that our immune system isn't constantly fighting it, really, because that's just constant inflammation. But you have some low level inflammation to that. So if you just start sleeping well and getting to where you should be, you can probably nearly stop that process. Reversing that process is where the question comes from. I'm not 100% sure to the degree it can be done. I know it can be done. And, we're working with new compounds. Essentially every day I'm hearing about new compounds that are showing promise in this area. And basically what these processes do is they cause like an acceleration of the repair processes that would have happened had you slept. Because that's kind of what's going on every night. Your brain is essentially flushing out waste product, repairing, pruning off unnecessary stuff and making important stuff more durable. That's what's going on in your brain when you're asleep. So if you aren't doing that, you have the opposite of that. That's all kind of a repair process. So nowadays, like we're really striving towards finding things that can reverse whatever has been done historically. But, the easiest and most effective thing right now is just to get going on a good lifestyle right now and valuing your sleep. And you can at least put a halt to that, and you'll reverse a lot of it, because if you're running around sleep deprived, you just aren't nearly the you think you are. And you won't know that until you get rid of your sleep deprivation. And once you pay all that debt back and start sleeping well, the colors look brighter and the world looks like a happier place, and you feel better and you're more motivated, and your body composition shifts, and you become a better husband and a better parent and a better friend. And like you just become a better version of yourself when you sleep. And so that's worth it right there. And then if you really feel like you have some deficits, or if you just want to go as far with it as you can, get into, you get in basically to like traumatic brain injury type work. And that's really what we're doing, because it's kind of similar. Like, you've been damaging your brain slowly over the course of decades. It's kind of the same as like getting like one big whack and, having a big TBI. And us military guys are screwed because we have thousands of TBIs on top of sleep deprivation. So,
Right. And those can come from, just being in proximity to a blast, meaning a 50 cal.
Actually machine, like just doing CQC, like just being in a closed space and shooting, even an M4, like you just like, the blast from it, like the muzzle blast from an M4 in a concrete room is 30 to 35 Gs. And traumatic brain injury happens, like the threshold for traumatic brain injury is somewhere just barely over a G. So it's like 1.09 or something, 1.1 maybe, but it doesn't take much to damage your brain. And then, breaching doors and hard parachute openings and Carl Gustav rounds. I mean, forget about like that. Like one Carl Gustav round, like that's a lifetime of brain injury. It's like 200 G's or something ridiculous like that. So, so I mean, we're resilient. Just like if you look at, like, we know what guys in the military go through with their bodies, right? And it breaks people, right? The equipment is more durable than the people wearing it, and we break and we repair and we break and repair. And some guys seem to do pretty well, even though they've been shot 20 times and had 15 surgeries, and they'd still walk around like they're normal dudes. And some people, get really messed up from just a couple of injuries. And it's the same with their brain. You don't really know to what degree you're suffering until you have the chance to repair it.
You mentioned a combination of first going for the lifestyle changes and then potentially doing some regenerative stuff. It seems to me we're in this kind of period where people are learning more about HRT, hormone replacement therapy, and we see clinics popping up everywhere. And one thing I want to ask you is that I see this kind of cookie cutter protocol being put out there where guys are given like a half a cc of testosterone cypionate a week and then a couple of other things. And it seems to me that a lot of these clinics, they don't seem to be doing the requisite analysis that needs to be done to see what people actually need beforehand. And it seems like a lot of people are using it as a Band-Aid rather than doing it in combination with a lot of the lifestyle stuff. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, there are many layers to that, but what you have to remember is that for the biggest part of it, and I don't mean this to asperge anybody, but for the biggest part of it, it's a bunch of medical doctors who have learned kind of a new way to make some easy money. And I don't mean, and like I said, I don't mean that to be disparaging. It's just, clinicians work hard, and if they can get out of like the 27 patients a day grind and, go work in a strip mall at an HRT clinic and make the same amount of money, they probably will. Unfortunately, most of those guys don't really know what the hell they're doing. And to your point, I mean, it's just garbage. Not only is it cookie cutter protocol, but it's all complete garbage. Like I do hormone replacement on people, and it's the most complex thing I do. I mean, it's the endocrine system is, the only thing more complex in the body than the endocrine system is the immune system. And the immune system is heavily impacted by your hormones. So the endocrine system is super complex and everything matters. And, this whole idea of, just take this certain amount of testosterone every week is about the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. You only need a basic understanding of physiology to realize that that's not going to work. Because if you take one shot at the beginning of the week, you put more testosterone in your body in a single day than your body would have made in a week. Your body is a smart organism. And then it says, well, shit, we don't need to make this stuff anymore. So you quit making testosterone. But then you also decrease the number of receptors you have for it because there's so much of it around. So, if you decrease the number of testosterone receptors by 90%, you only end up with 10% of the receptors. Like that's the only thing that's active, right? It has to bind the receptor for it to matter. So if you're only binding 10%, it doesn't really matter how much testosterone you have in your body at that point because you don't have that much binding capacity. And then what happens also is that the half-life of an injectable testosterone isn't that long. Like we produce testosterone every single day of our lives. And when we start taking testosterone, it decreases or completely stops our own testosterone production. So now you basically have this big bolus at the beginning of the week and you're super physiologic. You're way higher than you would ever normally be. But you only have enough receptors to kind of perform normally as if that was the ideal amount of testosterone for you. And then 2 days later, your testosterone is kind of average where it should be, but you only have a tenth of the receptors. So now you only have about a tenth of the testosterone effect that you would have had if you just had normal testosterone levels. And then by the end of the week, you're really low. And then another thing, when you do this big bolus, is a lot of that converts into estrogen, and then estrogen is a signal to our brain how much testosterone we have, and it shuts down testosterone production even quicker. And it binds these proteins in the blood that carry sex hormones around. And that's called sex hormone binding globulin. And when you bind those up, that's irreversible. So once one of those proteins grabs hold of a testosterone molecule or DHT or estradiol, estriol, estrone, all those, it doesn't really matter. If once that binds, it's useless. It's going to go back to the liver, being chopped up into little pieces and made into something totally different. So what you'll see is when people first start doing testosterone therapy, they feel really good until their receptors start downregulating. And then over the course of about 6 months, they'll feel worse and they'll look worse. And then if they keep on it for a year, they're usually far more miserable than they were when they went in to get the treatment. It's just frank irresponsibility, but it took me 20 years to learn what I just told you, and most of these guys are opening up a little shop in a strip mall, or they're taking like a weekend course, or maybe an online course. It's a month or 6 weeks or something. They just don't know enough. And it's really complex. You can't use the same thing for everybody. And there's all these intermediates between cholesterol and testosterone. There's like 17 different molecules that are made during that period of time. And they're probably all physiologically active. I mean, we know that we know for a fact that like 6 or 7 of them are, but they're probably all metabolically active to some degree. And we just don't know how yet. So you're missing all of that benefit and you're just getting the one thing. And it's kind of what pharma's always done, right? And that's what they did with sleep. They're like, well, when you sleep, GABA increases in your brain, and that dissociates your brain from your environment, which is really what makes you, which is kind of the definition of being asleep, is not being awake. And that's actually the best definition, is the lack of wakefulness. You're not aware of your environment. You're not paying attention. You're still hearing, but you're just not registering it, right? Your ears are still working. Obviously you aren't seeing because your eyes are closed, but you're not interacting with your environment. That's all it really is. And so the pharmaceutical company said, well, we can make this molecule that's 1,000 times more powerful than GABA, and it binds GABA receptors. And that's what sleep drugs are. And that's what benzodiazepines are. And again, you skipped over about 53 million important steps. You're just doing this one thing. Yeah. And you think, oh yeah, we've outsmarted the body. Like, how arrogant do you have to be, to be like, I don't know, even if you're in your 60s, like you've been on this planet 60 years, this body's been evolving for millions of years, and you think you've got it figured out and you've outsmarted it? Come on. So
yeah, it's such a complicated cascade of interactions and hormones and all these different things. And it seems like, if you go about it irresponsibly, you're basically painting yourself into a corner. And if you're not doing the requisite work as far as the lifestyle changes and not fixing the underlying condition, you're gonna make it much worse, because you might feel better for a period of time, but maybe you're doing other things to increase your inflammatory levels, and that in turn is going to affect your health in another way, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, the reality is, I work really hard to bring some reality to this concept of optimizing your health. People think if they go buy, a couple of wearable gadgets and read a dozen books that they're going to be fine. I think, well, you're better off than if you didn't do anything. But it'd be no different than me saying, I'm going to read a few books and I'm going to be my own lawyer. I can do a lot of the work of a lawyer by not breaking laws, right? And so like my lifestyle is to not get in legal trouble, so I don't need a lawyer. That's the best thing I can do about being a lawyer. But if I do get in trouble, or, if I do need a lawyer, then I need a lawyer. And it's the same thing. Like, if you've been taking care of your health your whole life, you're probably fine. And if you have a medical issue, then you go see somebody who's an expert. But if you haven't been living your life well, right, it'd be like, I've been breaking laws every day of my life for 20 years. Well, I need help. I'm not going to be able to get myself out of that, because it's a really complex issue at that point. It's not that complex of an issue to just kind of keep going with your life and make good lifestyle choices and sleep well and exercise regularly and eat well and, control your stress and, don't beat your body to death. Don't go do 4 a.m. CrossFit courses and, that kind of crap. But after you've already done the damage, it's totally different than just maintaining. And so if you've done a lot of damage, if you're starting with a deficit, you just need help. And you're not, unless you just quit your job and you just study full time, like you're just not the right person to be solving your issues. You need help, and not necessarily a physician. But you need, like, a good health coach, or good trainer, or good nutritionist, like, maybe somebody to help you with your sleep, or somebody to, work with a psychologist, or somebody who can help train you to reduce your stress in your life, and those types of things, do some mobility work, get some, all that stuff. So that's my metaphor. But you just really have to appreciate how complex it is. And a lot of people feel like they should be able to do that. Well, I don't feel like I should be able to defend myself in a lawsuit. I don't feel like I should be able to defend myself in, any type of criminal suit against me. I would hire somebody who knows what the hell they're doing and does it for a living. Yeah.
When it seems like we latch onto quote unquote miracle cures too. So, we've got like the rise of cannabis right now, which
right.
I use cannabis from time to time, or, I had on a couple of people who were talking about the carnivore diet and just eating only and things like that. When you see somebody either using these quote unquote natural remedies to try to sleep, or to try to reduce stress, or to try to reduce inflammation, what do you think about that? And how do you explain to them that this new cult they joined might be masking over the issue?
Yeah, well, that again, as I alluded to earlier, it's part of the immediate gratification cult of one. It's like, we're so technologically advanced right now that I can solve this 30-year deficit with, one pill, or one exercise, or one diet change. It's like, no. It's not that simple. Everybody, use your brain. If it were that simple, there wouldn't be fat, broken, out of shape people. And I think that what gets overlooked, and again, I don't think this is the consumer's fault as much as it is the advertising and marketing fault, is that, and social media to a large extent as well, is that we kind of portray this ideal lifestyle. And this ideal lifestyle is like getting up at a certain time every day and doing certain things in your morning and eating like this exact food, and then doing this, and then it's very prescriptive. All that will do is make you very good at that. Now, as soon as you get outside of that, you're going to be just as screwed as you are right now, getting outside of whatever it is you do. To me, like what being fit is sort of like the Darwinian idea of being fit. And it's that, you are capable of handling a variety of stressors and a variety of stress levels. And whether that's how much sleep you're getting, or how, nutrition, or how much work, muscular output you're putting in a day, like how much physical work you're doing. I think it's very detrimental to have, I call them candy ass diets. And, candy ass diet is just basically, I only eat these 3 things. Like, all right, well, you're dead. Like as soon as anything major happens, you're going to die because you can only eat 3 things. And those things aren't going to be available if you get stranded in the woods somewhere or, whatever, like, electricity like we lose the power grid for a week, you're dead in a few days because you can only eat a few things. And the same thing with like exercise. Well, I only run or I only lift weights. And it's like, no, like if you want to be able to thrive in this world, you have to be able to do everything that could possibly come your way. Now, I would even go as far as to include like crappy junk food in there. Like, I don't think you should be going to the store and buying Twinkies every day. But, if you go out with your buddies and it's like, hey, we're going to have some beers and fish and chips and, like whatever, you should do that now and then because your body needs to be able to handle that in case, the unforeseeable happens and all you have to live off of is fish and chips. Now, of course, you're going to suffer a little from that, but what matters is where you live. So you eat, you eat a healthy diet and you maintain a healthy lifestyle. That's where you live. You can visit anywhere, right? You can go to LA and live in a homeless camp for a couple of days, and it's not going to kill you. But it doesn't change who you are. But if you lived in a homeless camp all the time, that's who you become. So it's where you live that matters. Do things every day that are the right things to do to make you more resilient and stronger and, stronger, faster, smarter, better looking, more lean, like whatever your values are. That could be cognition and mood and like artistic creativity, whatever it is, but you do the things that optimize you and your world, but you definitely need to strike out and like, just dip your toe in the water everywhere and just go, well, what would it be like to be a vegan for a week? What would it be like to be a carnivore for a week? I think that's what makes people the most resilient and longevity, and not just, when I say longevity, I don't mean necessarily the years of your life, but like your health span, like how many years of your life are you really capable and how capable are you? Like, I can do just about anything that I could do at 25. I can't do it as long, right? Or as many days in a row, but I can do just about anything. And so to me, like that's longevity. To me, that's health span. And that's what I'm aiming for. I would like to be able to perform really close to how I perform right now, 20 years from now. And when I die, I don't know, maybe I die 20 years from now, maybe I die 50 years from now. I have no idea when I'm going to die, but I want to be as metabolically flexible and physiologically flexible and, psychologically flexible, emotionally flexible, just, experience it all so that you're capable of everything.
It seems to me, and this kind of just occurred to me, when you're dealing with clients and you have them coming in, there's this idea of need versus want, right? And so these guys might want to come away feeling like they're studs, feeling like they're Superman, feeling like they're going to be able to do buds, or they're going to be able to roll jujitsu 7 nights a week or things like that. Right. But it seems like you've got to go through this period where you're talking to them and you're kind of bringing them back and resetting them psychologically. How do you do that? Because that's a big business point too. When you're selling people something they need, it's a lot harder to sell them on it.
Right. So one thing that I think, it's imperative, obviously, is that you have a lot of credibility and a lot of rapport with them, because they have to be willing to do a lot of stuff they don't really want to do or think that they should have to do. So the first business step there is to have that in place, whatever that is, whether that's social proof or credentials or, testimony, whatever it is, but you need to go into these relationships. You want to be really helpful. You need to go into this relationship with them willing to do anything that you say to do. Because if you're not going to listen to me, then why am I going to work with you? Now, the next important step is to set realistic expectations, to your point, which is what I spend probably, so I do annual programs, and I probably spend about the first month talking them into the reality. Because to your point, they come to me, they're 45, 50 years old. They're 40 pounds overweight. They haven't exercised strenuously, anything that I would consider strenuously, for years. I mean, maybe at all in those 25 years. And almost all of them were like Division I athletes, or, fancied themselves great high school athletes or whatever it is. And they think they're going to get back there. And I'm like, well, you're not. I mean, there's a very, 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 very slim outside chance that you might be able to approximate your 25-year-old performance at 50 in very limited sports, very limited activities, but that's not going to happen in a year. Like it's going to take you multiple years to get there. And so a big part of that is just proving to them how far off they are, because we deceive ourselves. Like even my comment, well, I could do anything I could do when I was 25. Well, that's probably not true, but a lot of the stuff, right? Like I'm deceiving myself a little bit. Like there's things that I just plain couldn't handle even a few minutes of. And so you prove, you have to prove to people that, look, you're way worse off than you think you are. And you do that by doing their blood labs, and you do that by doing like a lot of testing on them, and, tracking some data. And getting them to be really honest with their subjective assessment of how they're able to handle these new things that you're putting them through. And you got to kind of grill them, and you got to kind of make them uncomfortable. It's not really a pleasant thing. I mean, maybe it's like the last quarter of it's kind of pleasant. You've become really good friends, and they've seen a lot of progress, and they're really optimistic about their future. But the first 3 quarters of the year are just really not that pleasant. I mean, they're really kind of second guessing why the hell they got into this thing, and like, man, this really kind of sucks. And surely I could just, I read this book, and I should just be able to, whatever, put butter in my coffee and drink athletic greens, and I'll be fine. It's like, no, sorry. If it were that easy, we'd all be studs, man. Like who wouldn't be? It's like the penis enlargement pills, right? It's like, if that crap worked, every guy would have, giant penis, right? Everybody who could afford the pills, So just silly.
That's awesome. What would you say to like the 24, 25, maybe even 30-year-old who's just getting out, and they're finding themselves in this place where, they're not able to stay in shape like they used to. They've got a full-time job now. They're not getting paid to train anymore.
Right.
What would you say to those guys?
Yeah. So to those guys, I say, you just think of it like a rheostat, like a volume knob on the stairs. It's like, look, man, just be realistic. You're going to have to turn this down for a while. You don't have to turn it off though. Like just turn it down. I find the biggest problems with guys is that they become sporadic when they get out. So they don't train much, or they don't train at all. And then they kind of get a little upset with how they look or how they feel or whatever. And then they're just going to like crush it and get in really good shape. And they just work super hard and overdo it. And then they get injured, or, they just feel like crap, and then they fall off again. And then the other thing is, when you're, like when I was a SEAL, I probably ate 10,000 calories a day, and I was like 7% body fat. Right. I mean, I can eat maybe 2,000 calories a day and maintain my weight right now, So, I mean, that's the biggest thing is just, to tell guys, look, and if they're 25, they're not going to experience this yet, but if they're 30, they're getting at the beginning of this. But, you just have to, reinforce to them. It's like, look, what you're doing right now is way more physical and way more challenging than you think it is, because it's just normal life to you. And once, like me, I got out and I started going to college, and I worked at the sports medicine facility. I was in college. I had a wife. I had a kid. And like the opportunity for me to stay in shape or even physically tax my body to anywhere near the level I could in the SEAL teams wasn't even close to being realistic. So what you just have to convince people of is like, you're not going to be in as good a shape as you were. And what I always tell people the goal is you just want to be in striking distance of being able to get in really good shape in a few months, right? So you just want to be able to maintain your body weight fairly well, maintain your strength fairly well, your mobility, your athleticism, your endurance, like maintain that to a reasonable level to where you're not like decaying, but just set the bar lower. You're not going to be like you were. Set the bar a little bit lower, and then just challenge yourself a few times a year. Have your buddies, I had a group of buddies, probably the first 10 years I was out of the SEAL teams. Every year, one of us just chose a challenge that we were all going to do. And it'd be like, all right, August, we're going to do like a rim to rim hike in the Grand Canyon, whatever. It's like, all right, crap, I guess we better get ready for that. Or it's like, no, we're going to go climb Mount Whitney. Okay, well, let's do that. Or we're going to go do a triathlon, or we're going to do a powerlifting meet. It doesn't matter, like whatever you and your buddies into. And even if you're not into it, just train up and do something like that. That builds that resiliency, and that will maintain your ability to get in shape. But if you're not, just like, as a doctor and entrepreneur now, I did not have this mental and cognitive capabilities that I have right now. I didn't have that when I was a SEAL, and right. I couldn't have gotten it, right? I couldn't have become a doctor while I was a SEAL. It takes too much, right? It's its own time commitment. You just have to admit the same thing is true if you get out into the private sector and you're doing like corporate type work and office type work, or even entrepreneurial work. You're not like out physically using your body. I mean, if you're a personal trainer or an athletic trainer or something, that's different. But if you're getting out to do, non-physical work, you just have to realize that your performance base is going to be lower. But that doesn't mean that you have to decay. You just like set the bar lower and then strike out from that every now and then, just to prove to yourself that you can do it and to maintain the flexibility and versatility to be able to do that.
Right. And just understand that there's seasons in life. There's
exactly.
Going to be periods where you got to use your body, periods where you got to use your brain.
Right. And neither one of them are, neither one of them's best. It's like,
Exactly.
I'm sometimes I really want to be in my body, and sometimes I'm really happy just being in my brain. And there's no right or wrong answer to that. It's just, maintain the ability to do both and stay as flexible as possible.
Absolutely. Well, yeah. Doc, I want to thank you for coming on here. I know you got a new ebook out, and you've got a few other things going on. There's the Doc Parsley sleep remedy.
Yeah.
Which is outstanding, and a few other things. Where can people find this stuff, and where can they look for you?
Yeah, my website has most of it. I would say 90% of what you can find on me is on my website at docparsley.com. And otherwise, you put my name, put Kirk Parsley into Google, and my my website will pop up, and various lectures and videos and so forth I've shot. That'll all kind of populate that way too. But the sleep supplement is on docparsley.com. The link to the ebook, the ebook's on Amazon, but I think the link to the ebook is on my website as well. And that ebook isn't meant to make anybody a genius on sleep. It's, well, I'm sorry. The ebook is on the website. The book is on Amazon. So I actually wrote a book called Sleep to Win. And that's on Amazon, and it's really kind of like the 100 most common questions I get asked, in the narrative format. So if you read that book, you'll know more about sleep than your doctor or any healthcare professional you work with, probably. And it's very easy layman's terms. The ebook is kind of a 10% version of that same thing, but kind of the same idea. Just captures the wave tops, gives people a foundation to be able to start valuing sleep. And that's really the key, I find. Is like, if I can get people to really believe that sleep's super important, most people are smart enough to figure out how to get good sleep on their own. They can go on the internet and read a book here and there, change their diet a little bit. It's not that hard to figure it out for most people. If you have a sleep disorder, that's different. But for most people, it's just value it. And that's what both of those publications are meant to do, is to encourage people to at least seriously look into the value of sleep for themselves.
And the sleep supplement is something that you developed over your time, and it's when somebody takes that real quick, is it one of these things that brings you down immediately and puts you into sleep, or is it something that's more gradual, or something that's just is kind of like sleep?
Yeah. So, it's a supplement by name, and it's a supplement to me very much by concept. So the ideal thing is to optimize your lifestyle around everything, and sleep being one of the major components of that. But there's also reality. There's a difference between optimal and reality, because we can't all live optimal lives because we have external drivers to our lives. And so you supplement the difference, right? And that's where, nutritional supplements come in, and that's where, gadgets and other things like that come in. And so, we evolved to use the sun as our cue, and I think most people know this. We use the sun as our cue as when to be asleep, when to be awake. And so does every other mammal on the planet. Ancestrally, the sun went down, and you essentially didn't have any light in your eyes for about 3 hours, 3.5 hours, and then you fell asleep. Well, nobody does that now. I mean, we have electronics, and we have lights, and and it's just not realistic that you aren't going to have any light in your eyes at all for 3 hours. And what that 3 hours does is it starts changing your brain, the physiology of your brain, and getting your brain ready for sleep. And I alluded to that earlier. There's GABA that kind of slows down your cortex and makes you not pay attention to your environment as much. And then there's also the melatonin secretion, which most people know of, which gets secreted from a gland in the back of your brain called the pineal gland. And that secretes something called melatonin, which is a hormone, which reduces the effect of stress hormones in your brain. It also triggers things like the release of GABA and a whole lot of other physiological changes. So all my sleep supplement is meant to do is to try to front load your brain with all the ingredients that would have built up over the 3 hours or 3.5 hours had you not had any light in your eyes and you had lived this optimal lifestyle. But all I'm really doing is bringing lumber to the construction site. There's nothing in there that's going to force you to go to sleep. There's nothing in there that's going to trigger any mechanism. It's just making sure that you have everything that you need. Your brain has everything it needs to do to be able to initiate sleep. And then it's a super, super light dusting of melatonin, just enough to kind of get you into that initial cascade, but your brain has to keep making it. It's not enough melatonin to keep you asleep all night by a long shot. And nothing in there really lasts more than 3 or 4 hours. But once the cascade starts going, people come up to me all the time and say, "Man, I took your product last night and I slept for 12 hours." And I'm like, "That's great, but my product didn't make you sleep for 12 hours because there's nothing in there that lasts anywhere close to 6 or 12 hours in your body." But they valued sleep, and they got into a good initiation, strong cascades, and they gave themselves permission to be asleep, and they got a great night's sleep. So that's really all it is. We recently reformulated it, and I tinkered around with a few other things to improve the efficacy of the GABA. And also I put something called phosphatidylserine in there, which actually decreases the production of cortisol, which is one of the major stress hormones that makes you awake. And as I said earlier, the definition of being asleep is the lack of wakefulness. And so you have to get rid of all the wake promoting neurotransmitters and chemicals, and cortisol is a big one of those. So that's it. Nothing magic.
Well, that's awesome. I know people who swear by it. I know people who say it's completely changed the way they look at things. And I think that's an important concept you mentioned there, is giving yourself permission to do this. And admitting that it's a huge part of who you are, how you're going to perform, and how you're going to show up as a human being. Right.
And that last statement, I think, is the most salient. It's really kind of what I'm trying to convince the world of right now. It's kind of what we opened with is it makes you a better person. It makes you the best version of yourself you could possibly be. You cannot you could be pretty damn close to optimal and eat a marginal diet or exercise in a marginally effective way. But you can't do that with sleep. Like, sleep impacts everything. It affects how you process information, and it affects how people perceive you, how you perceive other people, how you communicate, what your emotions are like, your emotional intelligence, your ability to handle stress, your ability to handle physiological stress, your pain threshold, your how much force you can generate, how much endurance you have, your gut biome, how well you can digest food, how well you can tolerate alcohol, how well you can tolerate any type of toxin in your environment. It's all determined by how well you sleep. And if you shortchange yourself on sleep, you're basically just making any stressor in your life worse and harder for you. And for me, I mean, it's my line of work, so it's obvious, but for me, it's like, this is the easiest damn thing I could possibly have you do, is just sleep. But it's still the hardest thing for me to convince my clients to do, even though they know of me as like the guy who harps on sleep. They still want to argue with me about how much sleep they need, and it's a cultural thing, man. It's just something we've been misled on. And it takes a lot to go against the grain of society and say, yeah, people are going to think you're lazy if you sleep too late, and people are going to say you're lazy if you go to bed too early, or you're weak or whatever. It's like, all right, but as far as I know, this is your life. You only get one, and they have their own life to live. So you should probably worry about your life and let them worry about their lives. And if they want to worry about your life, they can. But I'd put myself first.
Right. And before we go, I just want to acknowledge you because, not just for your service as a SEAL, but to take the path that you've taken. I mean, there's probably a million places you could have gone as a doctor, a million different things you could have done that were a lot easier than this. And instead you've chosen to spend a good part of your life putting warriors back together after they've been broken, and telling people the hard thing, which is that it's not always what people want to hear. So I think you're speaking the truth, and I appreciate what you do.
Wow. Well, thank you very much. That means a lot. I appreciate the kind words there.
Absolutely. And
it's useless. It's useless without guys like you to put it out there, though. Like, nobody can hear me if I'm not on a podcast or a stage or a television. So
that's the beauty of living in this time and place where anybody can do it. Right.
Yeah.
You've made a lot of effort to get the message out there, and it's requisite for people like me to put the message out there and help you to do that. So, and to everybody out there, make sure that, you pay attention to what we discussed in this episode. I'm going to have all the links for Doc Parsley up on the show notes for this. Make sure you get over, grab that book from Amazon, and, take a look at that sleep remedy. These are things that can truly help you to become a better person and to live your best life. So with that, guys, thank you so much for listening. Get out there, live your best lives while you can. And we are out. All right, ladies and gents, I hope that you enjoyed that conversation with Doc Parsley. Like I said, he is one of the smartest individuals that I've ever met when it comes to human performance and when it comes to your overall health. Be sure to not just listen to this stuff, go out there and actually apply it to your lives. And we'll have all of Doc Parsley's links up on the show notes for this episode. For those of you who want to go and check it out, you should definitely check out his TEDx talk. It's really eye-opening as far as the things we do to ourselves and burning the candle at both ends. Wanted to mention this. As many of you know, we have this group called the Warriors Obituary Society. It's a group for men who are working to empower each other to live their absolute best lives. And the thing about this group is that it is catering to those of you who are trying to figure things out. When our new members come in, they're put through an 8-week development program. So the first step is we outline your vision, your goals. We bring some clarity to what your purpose is here on this earth. And then from there, we're working on specifics. We're working on your fitness. We're working on your personal finance. We're working on your business and career goals. We're working on your relationships, all to get you to prepare so that you can take that journey toward those giant goals that you have. And the thing about this group that I love the most is the daily conversations we get into. We have a private forum that's not run on social media. It's run on a Slack workspace because, number one, I don't want our members going on to social media all the time and getting distracted by the 10 different alerts they're going to get. Number two, I don't want anybody looking over anybody's shoulders. So the Slack channel is where it's at with the conversation. We also have a voice channel on Voxer that we also communicate through. And each week we're getting on live calls. Once you're through that 8-week development program, the work just starts. That's when we are holding you accountable toward those goals, making sure that you're getting things accomplished each week that are going to add up to your vision. So if that's something you're going to be interested in, if it's something that you think you want to take part in, let me know. Send me an email over at chris@warriorsoulagoge.com, or you can message me over on Instagram @warriorsoulagoge. I am really, really looking forward to taking you guys through this program and to working with you to make those visions happen. And beyond that, if you like the show, please let us know about it. Please head over to iTunes, write us a written rating and review. That doesn't cost you anything at all. And that's the biggest thing that's going to help us right now. I'm always getting notes from people asking how they could support the show. Writing us a review is the biggest thing you could do for us right now. We're trying to get all of this information to the hands of veterans and everyday people so that we can shape this country for the better. So please do that. And with that, I don't have anything else. I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll be back at you later on this week with some more awesome content. And get ready because we have some awesome episodes coming up for you. I'll be talking to you soon, and I am